All right, so just to get the panel started, I have a question for everyone. And we have seen very different systems, some of which seem more intuitive, some others are innovative, but perhaps less intuitive. So my question is from the perspective of acceptability, what have you done or what have you found in the works you presented? Perhaps we can start from the right side.
Well, accessibility. So for our
acceptability.
Acceptability. Right. That's very good. We actually found fairly, broad acceptance to our system, right? So in our study, we didn't find it difficult to convince healthcare workers to put the BLE beacons into their badge holders. As you can see, there were 187 healthcare workers were consented and participated in the study. So I would say it did well in that regard.
Yeah, for us, acceptance was kind of a need because we were all struggling in a COVID and we wanted a way around to interact with people who started coming to office. But there were situations or multiple scenarios, like when we tried in a workspace scenario, we had a pushback because people were more concerned about privacy. So there was little to no acceptance. But when we tried a scenario like events, which is confined in space and have a purpose and people are there to interact, then it just slid really well. So for us, it was kind of like intuitive for now.
Well, actually, my system, because it involved a lot of sensitive information and the users needed to upload like their socioeconomic status, like income level. So actually, it's difficult for the general public to accept that they have to upload a lot of sensitive information about themselves. So currently, I'm working on it to address the privacy concerns, like maybe we can add some noise or like using some state-of-the-art technologies like federated learning. So the user can train local models on their devices and upload only the weights or some data after adding the noise. So it can increase their accessibility. Yes, thank you.
Well, in my work, I feel like the grandparents, because my participants include grandparents and grandchildren. So, and I should present AR technologies for them. Some of them refused my invitation to attend our user study because of they are to some extent afraid of new technologies and the new concepts for them. So I think to improve the acceptance of new technologies to more like people, like aging people or some kids, maybe we could do more research to let them know to get relaxed with these new technologies.
Thank you. Actually, acceptability is one of our motivations. So a lot of you have used voice assistant before. The voiced version of assistant are actually pretty accurate. So basically, it can recognize everything that you said. But a lot of people, they're reluctant to use that. Studies have found that major reasons, one is privacy concern, because you don't want somebody to listen to you all the time. The other is like social awkwardness, because it's a little bit weird. And using silent speech is one of the motivations, to kind of compensate for these two issues. And yeah, so studies also found that users tend to be more tolerant for errors when you're doing silent speech. So I think that's what acceptability means for this project.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. For my scenario, we never really got to deployment because of the challenges in sensing, but a lot of participants did ask me if the skin response sensor is in the Apple Watch. But unfortunately, the challenges with wrist-based EDA sensing exist, but maybe a conductive sock would be more acceptable. So once we see more adoption and more consensus on how to use EDA for context-aware sensing, maybe we can look at those challenges.
Thanks.
Thank you. So what we found in that work and other work we've done with, say, an AR user and a bystander is that the user will very much just prioritize their own usage of the system, right, and just not care about acceptability whatsoever. Whereas the bystander, it's the flip side. It's, well, I want to have some sort of acceptable use of my data, etc. So there's a weird contrast there, which I think is quite interesting, which we explore.
Thanks, everyone. We can see here why this session was called human-centered, right? Because at the core, each of you is facing the same challenge, expressed perhaps in different ways, and how you negotiate those important questions, it really matters. All right, so let's open also the question for the audience. Would anybody like to start? Over here?
Hello. Thank you for those wonderful presentations and the great projects that you are all doing. My question is about the study on the students during school closures. So just to clarify a question I had about the user data you just mentioned, some of the parents were worried about inputting their information onto your data collection. So do you need identifiers in your software or your processing? Or did you run anonymization techniques to actually remove user identifiers and just keep the information or in a randomized order or anything?
Yes, of course. And we get the data from the Faculty of Medicine from our school. And when they send data to us, all identifier information were removed. But still there exists some privacy concern because sometimes because there are many contextual information in the data. And based on this data, you may be able to identify the people. Yeah, so it's still very sensitive.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So there was a question here on the front.
Hi, my question is regarding the EDA challenges that you faced in the productivity analysis. So people have found out that there are age and sex related differences in EDA. So did you by chance normalize your EDA values based on the age of the participants or sex or any kind of normalization was done?
I'm glad you asked that. For selecting the participant pool itself, I tried to make it as homogeneous as possible. But now in the EDA community, there's two approaches of doing this. Some people use min-max normalization, right? Now, and even a standard baselining approach is to take maybe the first 15 minutes of EDA and consider that the baseline. But honestly, publications on recommendations for using EDA, which are nearly 30, 40 years old, say that you can not use the minimum and maximum for the session as your extremes, but the minimum possible response a person can have and the maximum possible response a person can have. So you need to elicit those reactions. Now, that's tricky, and there's no guidelines for that. But I used z-scores to standardize and just to avoid using min-max. And yeah, that allowed me to use the leave one subject out participants, analysis.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right, so there was one question here in the first row.
In the silent speech interface research, did you do any acceptability studies with users, how are they comfortable with making such mouth movements in public?
So yeah, thank you for the question. So during the study, we did ask the users how comfortable this device is, and so we have exact results in the paper. Basically what we found is users found this device very comfortable, which is expected because so basically the device that we have during the study is just one commodity headphone. So if they find wearing headphones comfortable, then they will find our device comfortable as well.
I'm more interested in how comfortable they were in making such mouth movements in public.
I see.
you still make silent mouth movements in public, right? So do you have any backing user
Right.
studies?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we did not specifically evaluate this part during the study, but we did find literature supporting that people are like basically compared with voice speech. They tend to be more. They tend to be happier to do silent speech instead. So especially in a crowd.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we have a question by Thad. No? All right, so that's taken care of. Over there, there's one question.
Hey, yeah, I had a question about the bystanders AR paper. It was really fascinating work, and I think something that I was kind of thinking about, and even in my own research, I kind of think about is, from a bystander perspective, something that we kind of have to broadly address is what sort of like reasonable expectations of privacy sort of exist, and I feel like depending on who you ask, they might have different definitions. So in your research, and maybe this might be in the paper as well, but was there any sort of insights into maybe a consensus on what sort of reasonable expectations of kind of privacy these bystanders even have?
Yeah, I think it varies a bit, just from that work and other work that we've seen. A lot of people seem quite happy with photoreal information being like relayed. It ends up being like, okay, well, what do you do after you've relayed it? You know, if you're capturing it and then you're storing it somewhere, okay, that's a big red flag for a lot of people. If you're then processing that, you know, photoreal information to try and infer, say, gender or sexuality or even things like that, again, there's a bit of a red flag there. And yeah, I think it depends as well on the task, because there's been some work done looking at, say, an augmented reality assistant for a blind person, right? So it'll tell you when you're walking down, you know, when the user's wearing it, walking down the street, okay, a person is approaching you, they're this distance apart, you know, maybe they're this height, they're this size. And, you know, it's a weird, like, conflict again between, well, okay, you want to respect that person's, you know, desire for that system because it's helping them interact with the world around them. But then it's, you know, abstractly, it's more, you know, invasive than, say, you might be, you know, comfortable with if the person didn't have an accessibility need or whatever. So there's lots of weird conflicting factors, which makes it a mess to study, quite frankly.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right, I had seen another, yeah, over here on the third row on the left side.
Yeah, I have some general questions since we talked about the acceptability and human-centered design. So basically, many of your work talks about data. You're getting new insights from the data, right? So then what happens is in reality, the users may face some errors. They have difficulty understanding what's going on, and so on. So my question to you guys is that do you have any opinions about how to actually empower users in such a way that they can use the system? Some of the even in the face of the errors, they can use the system in a more effective way so that they can get over some of the erroneous situations.
Is that to all of us or just to
Yeah, anybody. So.
Thank you for the question. So basically the question is how to engage users in the entire system, the entire process, I think. And yeah. Yeah, exactly. So one thing that's particularly interesting in my system was actually, so as I just found right now, like in the demo, so I wouldn't do the demo if it wasn't working quite reliably offline, but it still didn't work very well online. So one of the reasons that I suspect is because I was nervous, so my heart was pounding fast, and that caused issues. So in the real use case, users may found things like that. So one other thing that our system has is, we do require users to speak slightly clearly in order to make good, in order to be recognized like a better. This is kind of like similar to like in a voice speech, you're expected to speak probably slow and probably not slowly, but like clear and loud, so that the system can recognize well. So the user themselves have some kind of feedback system that if the system works well, then the user know that you're engaging the system in the right way. If it's not, then the user can adjust their behavior so that you can get better performance think that's like one way to engage the user in the system.
Would anybody else like to respond to that?
I don't think I'm directly answering this question, but I just want to echo the sentiment that user acceptance is so important, right? So from the very beginning of the study, right, we essentially surveyed users, right, to understand that smartphones is completely out of the picture, right? So that changed the entire direction of the project, right? So I think that's very critical to make sure it is acceptable to the users. We did a lot of other work using wearables such as Fitbit wristbands, right? Wearables, right, to predict clinical outcomes and mental health and so on. I think the reason these new generation of commercial off-the-shelf wearables are so appealing to our studies is because people are actually willing to wear them, right? So 500 million wearables were sold in 2021 alone, right? So that really says something. Right? It's really good time for those kind of devices that are acceptable to the users.
Rosa, we have a question over here.
I guess a related question maybe for all of you is this idea of trustworthiness. How do I trust that you're going to use my data, to contact trace and not to say I'm taking too many coffee breaks or, I'm using my data beyond the risk. And so that's also safeguarding the user. And, there aren't enough safeguards. So how do you do that?
That's a very good question. I think, first of all, let me say that the reason they like the beacons more is because they can put it on as they enter work, right, enter the unit, right? So then they leave it, right, on the desk when they exit the unit, right? So they are only tracked when they are working, right, in a clinical unit. So that's the improvement. That doesn't answer your question, I agree. But I think it's a very good question. Certainly that means we have to drop a lot of the raw data, right, and keep only the features of the data that are relevant to close contact instead of the raw information that it can be used to reconstruct the localization. Very good point.
Would anybody like to add to this important question of safeguards in their systems?
Yeah, so I would say with us, people were like quite, they were like, why you are placing a camera in my bay, maybe I just roam around to have some chats. So for us, we have to put signages that say specifically that we are not recording or we are not using the data in any way. And we have to go through reviews to make sure that people are comfortable with it. And there was the other question you had with acceptance. For us, it was the other way around. I think we first started as a tech-driven project, but eventually we become an HCI-driven project because we were improving based on the feedback from the users. And they were doing random things, and those random things makes much more sense than what we were thinking, right? So that's how the things can evolve. So rather than giving out something and expect people to use it, it's sometimes be better to be built around user and let them know, or let them tell you like what they're thinking, what can work here.
I think one way to increase the trustworthy is to make the technique more transparent to the users. And also, if the system can generate some conclusions that are consistent with their common sense and their prior knowledge, there will be more trust to the system. Yeah.
All right, so I think we have 1 minute left for the session. And I would like our posters in the back to have a chance to be seen and discussed. So let's thank our presenters for the very insightful discussion. And we have one more announcement from the general chair. So just hold on, we're going to set a couple of slides to show to you. Yeah, you can get up. Thank you very much.